Hi! Last time we talked about phrasing using our right hands and our bows, and today I want to talk about how we can use our vibrato to aid in our phrasing or to convey different colors or moods. So I think generally musicians tend to ignore vibrato and how it can be used to phrase. Too often I feel like the vibrato I hear might detract from what a musician's actually trying to do, or it's underutilized, or even that musicians are unconsciously leaving out vibrato on fingers that are weaker or when they have uncomfortable fingerings. And physically, the third and fourth fingers are a little weaker than the first or second ones, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't vibrate on them. And I think it definitely distracts from what the musician is trying to do when vibrato is needlessly just left out. I think that's very different from intentionally using non-vibrato, which is just not using vibrato. But I think you need to use it in appropriate ways, whether it's a phrase that's dying out, or a stillness in the sound, or even coldness. I think non-vibrato can be very effective when used right or used intentionally. So I want to go into the two aspects of vibrato that can be adjusted for the vibrato to sound completely different. The first way is changing up the width of the vibrato. You can use a narrow vibrato or a wide vibrato, and they convey completely different things. A narrow vibrato would sound something like this. I'm barely moving my finger at all, and if I'm thinking about what I'm physically doing, I'm using more of a finger vibrato rather than any of the others. So there are three main ways that we can vibrate using the finger and rocking just on the finger joint, which would be here or here. We could use a wrist vibrato where we are moving at the wrist, or even an arm vibrato where we're moving our entire arm. And the more of my arm that I'm using for vibrating, the more passionate that I'm gonna need my vibrato to be, probably. I wouldn't use my entire arm for a very thin, whisper-like or shimmery kind of vibrato like I just played. But if I'm using a wider vibrato, I might use my whole arm, so it would sound something like this. The other thing we can change is the speed of our vibrato. We can have a very fast vibrato or a slow vibrato, and the two will sound something like this. Fast and slow. And I think there are two purposes that we could be varying our vibrato. One is within a certain mood that we already have to show how we're phrasing, whether we're swelling or leading up to a certain climax in the phrase, but maybe the dynamic isn't changing or the mood itself isn't changing, and the vibrato is just getting faster or slower or wider or narrower, just based on where we want to convey more intensity or the climax of the phrase. The second purpose I think we could use varying vibrato for is when the mood of the piece is changing, or maybe we're opening up and we want to use a little bit more of intensity in the sound and vibrato. Maybe we're going from a section to another section where the moods are completely different and we want to use a totally contrasting kind of vibrato. So I have two excerpts that I think demonstrate these two purposes a little bit. The first is from Schubert's Arpeggione Sonata, transcript for viola, and I'm taking from the first movement opening. The opening is all pretty much piano. It only goes to pianissimo, And that's pretty much the only dynamic change that I'm seeing in the entire opening that I'm about to play for you. So in my vibrato, I'm going to change up the two main aspects, width and speed, based on where I'm phrasing towards. So every time I'm getting to the center of a climax, or every time I'm getting to the loudest part of a swell, I'm going to be making my vibrato just a little bit more passionate, while still in the same mood of the opening. And I would say my mood here is a little bit pleading, but in a longing, melancholy sort of way. We're in a minor key, and I think my vibrato is generally going to be less intense because of our softer dynamic, and it's not going to be in any of the extremes, whether it's very narrow or very wide. It's probably going to be in the middle, and the speed is going to be about the middle too, but only getting faster when I'm getting more intense. So I'll show you that excerpt right here. The second excerpt I have is Brahms's first sonata for violin and piano, but transcribed for viola. And the reason why I chose this is because in the opening of the first movement, I feel like the mood of the piece opens up from piano to forte. So we have drastic dynamic change. Our mood opens up and it goes from being a little bit closed, a little bit more inward, or somewhere between a whisper and a regular speaking voice, all the way until an open declaration. And I think my vibrato is going to widen and speed up, but in a more drastic way than it did with the Schubert. Here it's going to be quite obvious that the mood has shifted and we've opened up. So this is the opening of the first movement of Brahms's first sonata for violin, transcribed for viola. I hope some of those thoughts were helpful for you in your own journey in discovering different colors and sounds to use to make phrasing and music more varied and beautiful.